do love the music of RAMEAU. It's, as I say, the second time I've sung this part. And it's very sexy music.
This piece is not just about the search for personal freedom, but a woman's personal freedom.
RAMEAU is so tuneful. It's a music of incredible sincerity, and I think it touches directly people's emotions, people's hearts.
RAMEAU is a very, very important figure now, I think, and will, I think, become more and more so in the next several years in terms of the new lyric repertoire in Europe and in the United States.
Je pense que les Boréades, oui, ça fait partie d'une des musiques d'opéra les plus importantes qui aient jamais été écrites.
The role of Alphys is a very special one. It's very beautiful. It's not very long, but it's quite dramatic, especially for my kind of voice. I have a light lyric voice, and it requires quite a bit of heavy singing and emphatic singing, delivery of the text.
Si j'en croise de masse, il est égal au roi. Un trajet balance votre choix. Par une loi suprême à jamais révélée, les seuls descendants de Borée arrêteront Seigneur le droit d'aspirer.
Alphys is a wonderful person. She's sort of like Pamina in a way. She's very true to herself. She has quite a moral backbone. She really wants to do the right thing for her people and also to follow her heart. She's very much in love with Abaris, the person she's not allowed to be in love with until we find out at the end that indeed she may get married to him. But she has a huge amount of love inside of her, and she's willing to show that, and I think that's very brave, just as Pamina is willing to do that as well.
We have a queen who cannot marry the person she loves. And why can't she marry the person she loves? Because she must marry within her caste. She is a lady, a Boréad lady, a lady who belongs to this rather sort of tight-lipped, dour and rather Protestant sort of group of people who belong to the tribe of the god of the north wind, you see. And there are two suitors, Calicis and Borilé, who are the two sons of the god of the north wind himself. And they are to be chosen amongst. So she'll pick one or the other as her husband.
Les plaisirs les plus doux n'ont un charme durable que lorsqu'ils volent près de nous. À descendre en ces lieux, Apollon se prépare, tous annoncent son retour, et le sage Adamas lui-même le déclare. Alphys, que cet jour éclaire d'un époux
Every time the Boreads appear, they destroy the nature because the wind does have this effect, cold north winds. So the flowers are all destroyed by the winds, if you like, I mean in a slightly rather stylized way. But there's also another thing at work there, which is that we have the freedom of a field of flowers, which is then turned again in a stylized way into a French formal parterre garden, because they rip up all the flowers, they then make a very exact square hole that they can dance in with the flowers making a border. These flowers are then turned into bouquets, which are presentable and given to the queen. Because she didn't want that. She liked her field of flowers, but the winds have destroyed that. So it's the mixture of, for me, in analyzing the piece, of what the winds do when you think of the winds, and what these boreades, the way they've been written and composed, do. I felt it was very important to find a choreographer with a really particular style, écriture, if you like, for the choreographic language. I felt that it needed to be really dealt with in a strong, powerful way, and not seem to be filling in, if you like, or coloring in around these musical moments. The music, Rameau's dance music in Les Boreades is very strange at times, always thrilling, but very odd, a lot of it. And I felt also, as I worked on telling the story, we slightly adapted the way the story functions with the chorus, which is on paper one chorus, the way in which I've put them into two groups who are radically opposed. The one group, who are the followers of Boré, the god Boré, and the Boreades, his two sons, who are representative of the status quo and tradition, and the fact that you must do things how they've always been done. It doesn't matter if you love someone, you have to make an arranged marriage, you have to do how things have always been done, the aristocratic tradition. And the opposite, the followers of Apollo, of course, starting with Abaris, who turns out to be Apollo's son, and to whom Alphys, our heroine, is so desperately attracted as she tries to struggle with the problem of her obligations and her search for personal freedom.
This production of the Boread is audacious. It's provoking. It's very new. It blends old and very contemporary. This is what I like, because I think that at any rate, I personally am more at home with someone like Robert Carson than I am with someone who might be more traditionally, with wigs and 18th century costumes and what have you. My musical vision is, I think, very close to his visual sort of perception of this piece. Elegant, clear, unencumbered with, and I think too that the dance pieces of Edouard Locke have a very extraordinary sort of rapport with elements of the Rameau music itself. People say the contrary, but I'm not convinced of that. I think, for example, the use of finger and body language, as well as the just dance movement, extremely interesting with Edouard Locke, and call to mind the intricacies of the actual musical writing itself. I think this extraordinary use of hand and foot also brings to mind some of the very codified and very elaborate sort of choreographic work of the 18th century itself.
C'est dans cet aimable séjour que le plaisir qui a son empire siffle nouvelle chaque jour, s'offre tout désir de zéphyr, et l'hymen qui soupire se part à l'étreinte de l'amour.
It's not just a question of what the theatre practices were like at the time. I personally am incapable of attempting a historical reconstruction, because I feel that you can, if you wanted to, you can reconstruct everything except the audience. And the really exciting thing in theatre is how you bridge the gap between what's happening on the stage and what's happening in the auditorium, because we only do it for the audience.
I have two arias. Abaris has, I think, 7, which is wonderful. The RAMEAU really seemed to love the high tenor voice. But the first one is Un horizon serein, which is my first inkling of the fact that the path that I'm being led upon to marry one of the Boreades is not the path I want to follow, and I'm very frightened by this prospect. So, and I see the storm, the clouds coming across the horizon, and it's a very poetic description of being afraid of something. Queen of Bactria, I must choose a king in order to continue my reign, and I must choose a king from the group of the Boreades, but unfortunately I'm in love with one of the Apollonians. And most of the first part of the opera is centered about these two Boreades, the two concurrents, trying to vie for my attention. And I don't like either of them, so it's really quite useless that they pursue me.
when we had the idea of following two major strands in the story, this opposition of personal freedom with social obligation, if you like, and pursuing this developing story through the development of the seasons, because, of course, to put it bluntly, les Boreades, the group of Boreades that we have are people who, since they are all followers of the god of the north winds, and the north winds always bring terrible, terrible weather, they like bad weather. So they're all buttoned up very tightly, they don't have any, they're wearing gloves, everything is covered, you don't see anything of them except their rather pale faces. And the followers of Apollo are, of course, completely the opposite, completely relaxed. They, you know, the phone rang in the morning, they forgot to get dressed, they're kind of schlumpig and falling about in a mess, and much more relaxed, and don't see things so with such a sort of perfectionist eye that everything has to be just so, even if that just so doesn't really mean anything. So for me, the Apollonians are more an expression from the inside of things are okay. The Boreads are much more highly groomed. And in terms of the scenic space, we wanted a space that would allow this development of the seasons to take place in a surprising way when you weren't expecting it. We start in summer, and of course we end in spring as we go through the 4 seasons. And the rebirth, of course, of nature that is implied with that.
Here in the Boread, I'm glad to say that I'm playing a man, having played a woman, effectively, in Parte. And this is very, very much a continuation of what has been a central obsession with the opera seria in France. And these problems of impossible love and then finding a solution, this time with a deus ex machina, Apollo who comes in the end and explains that in fact all is possible, there is no problem.
Aperçois ce mortel dont j'ai levé l'enfance. Apollon m'a remis ce dépôt précieux, mais il doit à jamais ignorer sa naissance, s'il n'est par ses vertus digne du sang des dieux.
I think that they do all share something, these Baroque composers, which is that there is a real sexual tension present between the characters, which is really developed. The Baroque composers seem to love seeing love being born, developing, denied, people knowing something that somebody else doesn't know. Handel's amazing exploration of the lie, the fact that so rarely in life do we tell each other the truth. And the fact that you're thinking one thing while you say another thing, and this extraordinary, for me, development of this basic idea, that the misunderstandings that seem so often to people to create ridiculous plots, create a really moving situation in theatre as you discover people discovering something that other people know and they don't know. It can be really heartbreaking.
Je ne dois point cacher mes tourments à vos yeux. J'aime Alphys sans espérance. Lorsque j'ignore ma naissance, peut-elle recevoir mes vœux? Ce n'est qu'en volant à la gloire que vous pourrez découvrir vos aïeux. Peut-être ils brillent dans les cieux, courez, courez, pour les connaître, au temple de mémoire.
RAMEAU was very old when he wrote this. This was his last piece, of course. But he was very willing to explore the concepts of love for love's sake, not courtship because marriages were arranged as they should have been. I should be marrying someone entirely different. But I am following my own heart, especially women. This is an interesting fact that women are beginning to gain power here. So I think that's absolutely true, that this is very much the beginning of the Age of Enlightenment.
Well, she can love, but she can't marry Abaris. Why? Because he's simply from the wrong side of the tracks. We don't know where he's come from. And of course this in a terribly sort of tightly sort of organized French society of the 1750s would have been a very interesting subject indeed, you know. She's just like all the court ladies, and she's very much like someone of the royal family. She simply can't go downtown Paris and have a lovely night and meet a lovely man, fall in love with him, and expect to marry him without some kind of awful opposition from her family. I mean, she is an aristocrat. She's royal, you know. This is the essential part of the plot. And we go through 4 acts, essentially, of her declaring her independence, her liberty as a woman in love,
J'aimais sans espoir de vous plaire, et tous les vœux que j'osais faire n'étaient que pour rendre ton âme.
Quoi? Sont révoltés, ma colère?
Hâtez-vous de me punir si mon amour vous outrage. Je sens qu'à chaque instant, loin de mon repentir, je vous offense davantage. Cruel, vous fuyez, vous souffrez à ma part, vous allez me haïr, que je vais être à plat. Quel espoir!
Je m'égare, mon cœur de caprice est contraindre. À Paris, respectez mon trouble et mes douleurs.
Et quels sentiments les pénètrent? Parlez, belle Alphise, ou jamais.
In this production that Robert Carson, I think, did very beautifully, and he underlines the story greatly by the pictures that he shows. The BOREADES are very strict and very dark people and quite negative in their attitudes and the way that they carry themselves. So it's quite obvious that this free, loving spirit, Alphise, a very different kind of person, falls in love with something that's light, that's so positive as the Apollonians.
La fée du dieu de Marie et dans les filles daigne remplir notre plus chère envie. La voix des plaisirs te ramène en ces lieux, que la voix des plaisirs te ramène en ces
almost all the great principles that are subsequently found in the French Revolution, amongst them personal liberty, are pretty much installed in intellectual society 30 years before the French Revolution. That's to say, at this particular moment.
C'est la liberté. It's a wonderful number. It's very short, but it really sort of sums up the piece for us women. We are allowed to make choices depending upon how we really feel about things. We're allowed to express ourselves finally. We're allowed to stand up to men and say who we are and what it is that we want. And I think RAMEAU was very brave there.
Now, in the choreography, most of which, the way it works out musically, is for the BOREADES group, I wanted, as I said, a very strong writing, and I was very interested in the idea of dance work on point. And I'd seen a certain number of works choreographed by Edward Locke and danced by his company, La 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 Human Steps, and I just had a feeling that this would be an exciting ingredient to mix in. I think this almost exacerbated classicism and this fracturing of it's of course a later classicism, this is the language of classical dance. And the way in which it works with the music, because it is not always on the music, for me at any rate, allows the music to be heard much more powerfully. I hear the music much in a kind of clearer way than if everything was on the music.
Apprendre l'art d'aimer et d'être. C'est de Dieu qu'on doit apprendre l'art d'aimer, l'art d'aimer et d'être. C'est de Dieu qu'on doit apprendre l'art d'aimer et d'être.
Why do we revisit these great works? We visit them because mankind, essentially, humanity hasn't really changed. So this fabulous experience that we have vicariously to sit down in a chair comfortably and to open our souls to the suffering or the joys of other people without us having to go through that experience, which is the essence of Greek theatre and some religious catharsis as well, is something that we seem to feel is a very necessary part of our experience.
The whole opera is looking forward anyway, the way in which it's in fact divided into 3 acts, although it's in a 5-act, traditional 5-act opera seria form. It's RAMEAU indicated that he wanted breaks after the first 2 acts and then after acts 3 and 4, making it effectively a 3-act opera and allowing the drama to develop much more fully than you would do if you were to break up the action all the time. It's a wonderful thing, a fantastic opera.
The second aria I sing, Songe affreux, again is reminiscing about this dream, but nonetheless I've now decided to follow my heart, and therefore love will triumph over my own fear. I'm not a RAMEAU specialist. I'm not one of the, what they call vegetarian or early instrument type singers. I have worked with many of these conductors who do this kind of music, but I think French Baroque is very, very specialized. The ornamentations are written out quite differently from what one would call normal Baroque ornamentations. And there are many, many livres, there are lots of treatises on exactly how one is supposed to ornament this kind of music. So it is quite specific, absolutely.
This music must be able to speak. It must be eloquent. It must find its tongue again, you see. And it must move people of today. I think the simple fact that some people find it so difficult, so awful, you know, and other people find it so wonderful and so moving is, well, we've touched everybody, you see. That's the most important thing. It's saying something, you see. And it's saying something with an extraordinarily powerful gesture.
Jouissons, jouissons, jouissons de nos beaux-ans, et je fais pour la tendresse son vol, c'est l'aile du dos. Jouissons de nos beaux-ans, et je fais pour la tendresse son vol. Jouissons, jouissons, jouissons de nos beaux-ans, et je fais pour la tendresse son vol, c'est l'aile du dos. Son vol, c'est l'aile du dos.
Alors c'est un opéra où les camps sont très clairs. Il y a, on pourrait dire, les bons et les méchants. Il y a, disons, les Apolloniens et les Boréens. Les Apolloniens étant plutôt tournés du côté de la lumière, de la douceur, de l'amour, et les Boréens, les disciples de Borée, plutôt tournés vers le strict, le froid du Nord, puisque c'est de là qu'il vient, l'étiquette.
I do sort of what King Edward did. I abdicate for the person that I love, that I'm not allowed to be together with. But as opposed to that situation, this one turns out for the good.
RAMEAU veut trop contraire, ne permet qu'à son dernier enseigné. Mais je peux accorder le choix que je veux faire avec la volonté des dieux, disposé d'un rang qui me gêne. Peuple, votre mouvement, vous décomblez de moi. Hâtez-vous de choisir le roi, je sais ce qu'être votre reine.
The world turns upside down. She's taken away by the north wind. We have Abaris, who's been not terribly courageous as a lover in face of all this, who suddenly, thanks to a couple of magical things, finds himself as the hero who's going to sort of set everything right.
Borée enflura, rassemble tous les vents dans ses climats.
You'll notice that every time the winds appear, the sky, which was clear and sunny, becomes very dark and cloudy. So in the first case, we actually have the sky which starts to fall and becomes very, very dark. And then it moves up again when we meet the Apollonians in the leaves, and then it completely disappears up, and we're left with a very dark cloud. Similarly, in the cold autumn night where we have a starry sky, of course, when the snowstorm starts, you can't have snow with open stars, so the stars all disappear, and we have a double storm. Actually, RAMEAU's amazing, one of his great contributions to the form, where he rather radically joined the third and the fourth act together with music. There isn't a full stop as we go into the storm of the fourth act.
Pleure, gémis, peuple odieux. Mon cœur dans ses transports aux envies aux dieux, ces foudroyants éclats de leur vaste puissance. Ah, qui doit être tout de punir l'offense quand on peut se venger comme eux.
I think my favorite aria in the whole piece is Lieu désolé, which happens in the fourth act. After the two pretendants of the throne have caused an enormous wind to come and effectively destroy the countryside. He arrives and he describes the situation. He describes the situation always in Baroque music. We use contrast, the contrast of day and night, the contrast of light and shade. And here he's talking about the winds have destroyed everything, this lieu désolé by the winds. But nature will reform everything that has been destroyed. But he has lost his love. And at that point there, he feels he's lost his love forever, and that will never come back. And it's a really glorious, glorious piece, accompanied by flutes. It's extremely passionate. I think that people sometimes don't understand that we think romantic music is, of course, very romantic, and it comes from the Romantic period. But Baroque music is incredibly romantic. And there, for example, is an obvious case. This is a tenor roll. It's a tenor roll, and haute contre simply means a high tenor. And it requires you to... There's a big difference between high notes in Baroque music and high notes in later music. They tend not to be so triumphant. You tend to pass over high notes on the way to the point of the phrase, the musical phrase. And so you need a sort of légèreté, an easiness at the top of the voice, which I hope I have.
Il peut, par les efforts d'un courage notable, se mettre au-dessus des revers. Votre fatal amour entraîne leur ravage en ce triste séjour. Brisez, brisez, une funeste chaîne. Au salut d'un grand peuple, au bonheur de la reine, osez immoler votre amour.
C'est évident qu'il y a une sous-trame maçonnique dans cet opéra. Je veux dire, la première fois que je l'ai entendu, d'un bout à l'autre, j'ai pas pu m'empêcher de penser à la flûte enchantée. J'interprète Borée, le dieu du vent du Nord, que je considère un peu dans la partition comme un peu le diabolus ex machina, c'est-à-dire qu'on en parle beaucoup pendant tout l'opéra, et on dit attention, attention, il est terrible, il est terrible. Et puis bon, finalement, après 4 actes, il finit par se manifester d'une façon assez comique pour quelqu'un dont tout le monde redoute la terreur, puisque sa première manifestation, finalement, est une manifestation d'impuissance. Tous ces esprits refusent de lui obéir et sont terrifiés par les pouvoirs nouveaux du héros Abaris. Et c'est vraiment, d'ailleurs, une des pages musicales les plus stupéfiantes, l'entrée de l'acte 5, et donc l'entrée de Borée, puisque c'est vraiment une musique qui raconte des tentatives de début de phrase, mais qui n'aboutissent jamais, et Borée par-dessus qui s'énerve et qui s'énerve.
Obéissez, quittez vos cavernes obscures, partez, vos orages, effrayez l'univers. Vous ne me répondez que par de vains murmures. Ciel, mes cris impuissants se perdent dans les airs. Marche avec nous. Quel prestige nouveau, vous lassez-vous de leur faire la terre.
And then in the 5th act, we are actually in the cave of Borée, which is very, very dark. And you again have this rather Baroque twist, which is that when you finally meet the god of the north wind, the winds aren't able to blow. And he's furious with them, saying, why can't you, make more devastation? And they're all shivering there. So we actually have also, as a rather light-hearted scenic idea, used the ordinary umbrella, which the Boreads have very tightly furled up because they're always hoping for rain. And these umbrellas are used, they contain snow and leaves, and they do all sorts of things. And then only at the very end of the piece is an umbrella actually used as an umbrella.
Et je commande enfin pour la dernière fois. Règne avec l'un des deux ou vit en l'esclavage. Un empire ou des fers, ton sort est à ton choix.
And that's also a very strange concept, that they're two suitors. And they quite clearly don't care for her at all, and they're never in competition with each other. You would expect that if there are two men after the same woman, one of them would say, take me, I'm better looking, or I'm richer. Nothing. They just go on as they kind of work together. It almost doesn't seem to matter to them which one gets her.
Trop superbe rideau, fière de votre naissance, la terreur et la violence. Annonce de mortel les vœux que vous formez. craint. Pouvez-vous être aimé? C'en est trop cruel.
What we have just done after that is within the group of the rather wet Boread, whose costumes have rather lost their crispness and have all slightly melted in the rain, with this idea that of the harmony of these two forces of nature, the sun god and the rain god, if you like to put it bluntly. Since they are united in this one character, we have tried to somehow unite them as well in the end by having all of the Boread begin to reveal themselves in the sun as the weather changes from very dark to very light, and they remove their Boread protective clothing.
Pour ce héros à tendresse éclatante, Boréas, en ce grand jour, cessez d'être ennemi. Une nymphe jeune et charmante, était de ton sang même, et mère d'Avaris. Une origine si brillante doit te faire chérir la gloire de mon fils. Qu'il règne.
And underneath, of course, they're all these Apollonians, who their lighter selves are released, if you like, and the piece ends with a celebration of this unity of the two lovers, with some more dancing.
And in fact, after a number of dances, really the last thing in the opera before a final dance, this extraordinary aria where, and it's a sort of a moral, as you might find in Handel operas, and to a certain extent in Mozart. It's a sort of a moral that love will triumph in all cases, and that one should put one's trust in love.
Why does the public appear to enjoy this music? Well, it's first off, the music is gloriously beautiful. There's something for everybody as well, and that's always good for opera goers. People can like the dance music, or they can like the choir and the great storm scenes, because there's always some kind of grand orchestral piece in these operas of RAMEAU. You have exquisite vocal music as well, solo music. And one adds always the fact that there's this element of discovery. We're listening, many of us, to this music for the very first time, which is very exciting.